Phylloxera is a little bug.
This is the wine buyer for Pastoral Artisan Cheese, Bread, and Wine, Mark Roble. He's going to tell us some secrets about wine.
And it was basically brought over to England by a couple of English entomologists to study this nasty little root louse that existed in the United States. And then the story is, on a hot August day, they opened a window in London, and these two little bugs flew out the window. And those two little bugs somehow got over the channel, and eventually Phylloxera became a bug that destroyed about 98% of all European vineyards in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There wasn't much to do to stop Phylloxera. There was a lot of people using sort of folklore cures. One of the major cures was, believe it or not, they would bury poisonous toads in the soil at root depth, assuming that the poisonous toads and all the toxins they would release would somehow kill the Phylloxera. No surprise, it didn't work. But what did work was a scientific ideal that was sort of making its rounds in sort of the intellectual circles and the coffee shops of Europe, and that was the idea of evolution, because our friend Charles Darwin had recently published The Origin of Species. And The Origin of Species probably saved European viticulture 10 to 20 years, because the story is that a French viticulturist was watching his neighbors bury toads as he was reading Origin of Species, and he sort of had his aha sort of eureka moment when he realized that if Darwin was right, all they had to do was bring over American rootstock, and if it would work, to graft American rootstock to European vines to keep them from having problems with Phylloxera, because the American vines had adapted genetically millions and millions of years with these little bugs, the Phylloxera louse. So that's exactly what they did. They brought over American rootstock, and believe it or not, about 95% of all European grapevines today, including the greatest vineyards of Burgundy and Bordeaux, Alsace, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, are all grown on American rootstock, mostly from Texas and Missouri.
You might be thinking to yourself, graft, what does that mean? Well, we have Mark Roble's friend, Steve Sullivan, a wine distributor for Chicago, here to answer that question.
A vine that you plant is made of a top and a bottom. The bottom part is known as the rootstock, and that is what is resistant to a disease that's called Phylloxera. On top of that is grafted the variety, whether that's Terret or Carignan or Syrah or whatever, which is basically taking the bottom part, making a cut of various different shapes, there's different styles of doing it, inserting the variety at the top, binding it round so that the sap can pass from the bottom to the top. So basically creating a whole plant. Once it's bound around and what's known as soudé in French, which means it's basically something that's taken, becomes a single entity, it will just become a plant like any other. It's not particular to vines. It happens often with fruit trees as well, with flowering plants as well.
So basically Darwin helped, push forward the solution for Phylloxera probably a good couple decades. I like to say, how Darwin saved the European grapevine. Darwin actually studied European grapevines for 6 to 7 years, and if you visit his laboratory in England, there's still sort of grapevines growing all the way around it, and that's pretty cool